All right, PlayStation guys, if y'all are not going to talk about Yotei, allow me to, see what the news is saying. It's one of those games that I'm not going to go out of my way to get. I thought Ghost of Tsushima was a solid game. Jin Sakai, in my opinion, was a really well done hero character. A lot of internal conflict with his story, and the external conflict was already there. That's something that I've heard that a good character should have. They should have that internal and external conflict, a lot of the struggles, failures, and then you kind of rise through the ranks. Gene Park says, I agree with this piece except for thinking Tsushima was more fresh story than Yotei. But I overall agree that there are a lot of stories about the cycle of violence. Even Miles Morales had a revenge arc in Spider-Man 2. Yeah, I thought the end of Spider-Man Miles Morales itself was kind of interesting, but that revenge arc in Spider-Man 2 was also very interesting. Where I kind of saw it anyways. I didn't beat Spider-Man 2 to the end. I just kind of stopped. I just looked at it and said, what am I even doing here? What did these guys actually write? But this is from an article that I saw on IGN, and I kind of dismissed it the first time I saw it. I was like, yeah, it's an opinion piece. People are going to play the game. They're going to have different opinions. And, there are all kinds of different interesting things around this whole PlayStation's storytelling style that I'm sure everyone's going to have a different take to this. This writer, Simon Cardy, says, I'm a huge fan of PlayStation first-party offerings. They've come to embody the sort of cinematic adventures I've always looked for when sitting down with a controller in my hand. Feeling like genuine blockbuster events meant to be savored. Oh, bro, don't be saying blockbuster. And PlayStation, they're not going to beat those allegations of the controller basically sitting down while the game happens. Anyways, but where in the past this brand of glossy storytelling felt like new ground being trodden, I can't help but feel that recently it's become the well-worn road. It's not just that all of PlayStation's major releases adhere to the new trademark third-person cinematic stylings. The stable of developers has become seemingly obsessed with stories that explore the exact same themes: grief and revenge. And I'm starting to get tired of it. As a rule, these games are all impeccably well made, but I'm starting to miss the era when PlayStation's range felt wider and things were a little more fun. Now, I think what Bro is saying is that so-called element that brings, or that the so-called quality has conveyed, is now getting stale. Number one, there's not really, in my opinion anyways, enough diversity in PlayStation's library at this particular moment to make or to hide this theme. The theme is always going to be there. Other people are going to do the same theme and people are going to praise those games, right? But the challenge here is when the theme shows up on the PlayStation side, it's like, what have y'all not done yet? Last year's game, the year before's game, before the year's game was also like this. And so with that in mind, this author is probably starting to see those fissures that have always been there, but are now becoming a lot more prevalent as these games are now basically the few games that are coming out in the PlayStation cycle. Or, as I guess I'll say, as many other games are providing different kinds of variety, or at least giving, some kind of an angle that makes things, slightly different and fresh. The realization that so many PlayStation games have explored the same grim story themes struck me when playing through Sucker Punch's new Ghost of Yotei. While I thoroughly enjoyed it and admire its consistently exciting approach to combat and genuine sense of discovery, it creates through exploration. Through exploration. I don't know what I'm reading there. I couldn't help but feel I'd been told this story before. As Atsu, you're tasked with avenging the death of your parents on a blood-soaked journey across 17th century Japan as you hunt down each of the Yotei Six. Not only is this tale unfortunately close to the plot of Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I also played to completion early this year, but it's the same combination of fiery revenge arc crossed with meditations on what is to grieve. What? on what it is to grieve. I can't read this morning. It's late, guys. That has become something of a hallmark for PlayStation Studios in recent years. 2020's The Last of Us Part 2 is an obvious trailblazer. Really? With Ellie's dark descent into rage-filled embodiment of revenge coming as a result of the death of her father figure, Joel. That, of course, was a sequel to 2013's original that explored how Joel struggled to cope with the death of his own daughter. You see, The Last of Us 2 was a story misstep. It jumped into this nihilism that y'all are saying is some kind of a trailblazer, but here you are, pretty much about to complain about the arcs that it explored. At the time, Last of Us was seen as fueling a wave of sad dad games, including 2018's God of War. But in hindsight, these were the building blocks for PlayStation's preoccupation with grief. Oh, well, there you go. 2022's Ragnarok is a story fueled by loss of mothers and sons and the anger that comes with them. The Insomniac Spider-Man series follows both Peter Parker, Miles as they attempt to overcome supervillain threats, as well as wrestle with their demons stemming from dead parental figures. 2020's Returnal is a looping sci-fi born out of blah, 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 blah on the beach, which may not be technically a first-party game, but certainly is a verifiable feast of maternal and paternal anguish. Don't get me wrong, he writes. I'm a fan of all these games as above, each singular in its depictions of the characters and each offering wildly different gameplay experiences. But when viewed as a whole, it's easy to hear that their stories are being sung from the same hymn sheet. Familial grief is at the center of all these stories, and while I certainly feel that mature themes have a place in games, it is starting to feel like I'm getting hit around the head with the same ideas at this point. The cycle of violence is in very real danger of becoming a loop of diminishing returns. Sometimes you can tell the story in a way that I think is actually super fresh. But in my opinion, I think there are many things that are missing than this, piece of the puzzle. I think The Last of Us 1, the reason its story was so masterful, right, was because it put somebody in a perspective where they had to be sacrificial. Joel had to put down all of his, I'm just living for me, I'm surviving for me, to taking care of this girl in this context, in this brutal world where he was first supposed to go ahead and just, take her to somewhere. Right? So all the way through this journey, he's trying to protect her. He's doing his best. And I don't know how many of you played the first Last of Us game. That game is just good storytelling overall. In my opinion, anyways. I mean, somebody may argue. But the story was actually compelling. Joe suffers a serious setback. Ellie has to go out there. You play as her for a little bit. Right? And then eventually Joe gets to the final phase. And he could just still go ahead and follow his Joel.exe script, but he decides, no, I'm going to go ahead and sacrifice again. That's what made The Last of Us actually solid, in my mind. And so when you put the revenge arc here in front of everybody, it just is kind of weird, that everything has become this revenge arc. And I think that's what this, writer is actually seeing. But again, it'll probably be one of those things where I'd have to play it myself. And see what, they're saying over here. The first comment says, Tsushima, TLOU, God of War, Horizon, Spider-Man, Uncharted. They've taken one set of characters and traced them over a dozen times. It's incredibly boring. Disgruntled to a father figure is unfair or difficult to understand emotionally. Eventually makes a mistake or dies. Yawn. Oliver Darko, who should be busy playing this game, but he's talking about Game Pass. I'm shocked that he has a comment about this stuff. He says, this is an odd take. Last of Us 1, 2, Returnal, Spider-Man, God of War, Ghost of Yotei Edition all tell the same story. I don't think he said that. I think he said Last of Us Part 1. Anyways. I mean, I don't know, man. I'm playing these games for gameplay mechanics and a whole bunch of other stuff. But when they write stories, to me, you can write revenge stories all day long, and the revenge stories would be pretty good, pretty darn good, right? Quentin Tarantino is, I mean, well, what am I saying? Quentin Tarantino ain't no PlayStation story writer, so I better just stop short there. Y'all take care. Have a good evening. Peace out.